Recently, there's been a lot of turmoil happening at Microsoft, specifically with the Xbox division, where a massive number of negative news have been simply piling up. Anything from profit margins needing to be met, allegedly massive layoffs, even secretly not even mentioning the public ones, canceled projects of games that are still not even revealed yet, pricing consoles that are essentially through the roof, new console releases, handheld hybrids are not necessarily moving, and a lot of exclusives making their way to other consoles, specifically PlayStation 5 and the Nintendo Switch 2. So in this video, I kind of want to talk about what Microsoft has actually been saying about making their games available specifically on the Nintendo Switch 2, since Phil Spencer down in Asia decided to give us a little bit of a quote. And for those who may not have necessarily been keeping up, I'm going to be leaving a link in the description below for a couple of the articles where I'm going to be quoting off here. But essentially, Jason Schreier a few days ago put out an article on Bloomberg where we got the confirmation that Microsoft now has a 30% profit margin goal that has led their gaming division to massive layoffs, canceled projects, controversial price rises, not just for the consoles, but of course the games now costing $80, and a multi-platform push. These cuts have been deep, and thousands of staffs have lost their jobs since these and recent layoffs, where even games like Everwild, this is Rare's games, and the Initiative's Perfect Dark reboot were canceled years in development in. Not only that, Cinemax's online studios, the Project Blackbird was also canceled. I didn't even know what game that was. And they also mentioned even more layoffs leading from that. They also don't mention in this specific article that quadruple AAA game that Microsoft was supposed to release that basically just kind of vanished out of thin air. The reason why I'm mentioning all this is that not only are they going through a lot of changes, but this has led to Phil Spencer having to kind of go out there and clean a little bit up of some of the negativity that's been put out there. And this is where we get into Nintendo stuff. There's a Nintendo Life article that quotes essentially Phil Spencer down in Asia, mentioning specifically that they're making massive efforts to lower the barrier of entry for people to play their games on different services, whether that's Xbox Play Anywhere or Xbox Game Pass. However, if there are people who play those games on PlayStation 5 or want to play those games on PlayStation 5 or the Nintendo Switch 2, they would love for them to be able to have those games available on those platforms. In regards, they have had excellent support both from Sony Interactive Entertainment and Nintendo. Now, the reason why this quote specifically is very interesting is, first and foremost, they mentioned there's a very clear distinction there. Xbox games play anywhere, which are, if you have Xbox Game Pass or pretty much one of like their older Xbox Live services, your games that you had there, you can pretty much play them on the cloud everywhere if you have one of those services. Game Pass also is pretty much an iteration of that, which lets you play your games whether on the PC or on mobile, you can stream it or whatever. But here specifically, they're making the distinction that, yes, we know there's a lot of players who want to play your games on Xbox Play Anywhere or even Xbox Game Pass, but there are players who want to play the games specifically on PlayStation 5 or the Nintendo Switch 2, which then makes the very clear distinction of like, well, we're porting games over. Now, we of course already know that they're going to be porting games over because the recent Halo reveal, this Halo remaster, I guess, or remake, or whatever they're going to call that, which is essentially a brand new game, but it's trying to be the first game or the first 3 games. I'm not even sure what they're trying to do there. That game is already revealed coming out of PlayStation 5. If anything, I think they also did the new Forza game. They did like Forza Japan they're going to do, and that's also coming to PlayStation 5, pretty much revealed right away. So one of the things that we know is that as of right now, Microsoft is revealing what used to be first-party games, revealing them alongside them coming to pretty much PlayStation 5 and anywhere else they can get them across right now. Now, where does Nintendo Switch 2 come into this? Well, Phil Spencer specifically mentions that they are working alongside Nintendo. What does that mean? That means developer kits, making sure that the developers that are working now with Microsoft and Xbox are making sure that they're getting their developer kits. Now, the issue with Nintendo right now is that seemingly out of nowhere, or pretty much for the last 7 months or so, there's been a lot of reports that they cannot get enough developer kits out there to people. There's a cost issue, which shouldn't be. I mean, they should just really be making those available to people everywhere, especially if they're needed for games to be ported on the system, and getting a Nintendo Switch 2 version of any single game that's already available on the base Nintendo Switch. But more importantly, if they're having negotiations with publishers, specifically now with like Microsoft and Xbox division, to not be able to have developer kits or provide all the tech that they need so they could put those games available onto your system day one, it's something of a massive miss, I would argue, because we have reports that Call of Duty was already mentioned to be coming onto the Nintendo Switch. Now, they never actually said specifically the first one. I think there were a lot of allusions or suggestions that they would actually make it for the next Nintendo console. I think this happened right before the Nintendo Switch 2 was revealed. So ultimately, we have now massive suggestions that yes, Microsoft is working towards something specifically with Nintendo, but they're making this very clear distinction. And Phil Spencer's quote here down in Asia, I actually wish I knew what kind of country where it was in, where they were talking. I'm guessing it was somewhere in Japan. But he specifically makes the distinction of like, if you want the games through the services like Xbox Play Anywhere or Xbox Game Pass, you should be able to have access to those. But if you want them specifically on the console, on the PlayStation 5 or the Nintendo Switch 2, then they would love to be able to make those games available on those platforms. That's specific wording there. Making sure that those games get ported over is probably going to be something that Microsoft is going to have to be dealing with going forward, since now they have this situation with this multi-platform push. Does that mean every single one of their games now goes third party? That most likely seems to be the case. There were also reports that a lot of the next generation console that they're going to have will have some sort of access to a Windows desktop situation where you can play basically all of your Windows games on the next Xbox or something like that. I guess that will be their big selling point. I'm gonna try to provide some sort of heading here on the images so you guys can see the article, but ultimately, because I just thought of that, I didn't actually think of it when I was setting up this video. So there is a lot of suggestion that they are basically going full on PC mode. They're moving away from the console space. And as far as their games are concerned, now that they've spent all those billions of dollars buying different publishers that now have all these massive IPs, and they have to fire people and they have to actually be accountable for profits that are probably not going to be met. Even in the article, I do want to very quickly touch upon, Bloomberg specifically argues that about 17 to 22% of expected profits is what the gaming industry usually gets. Xbox has hit 10 to 20% in the past, but to expect them to hit a 30% target into more context is just not relatively achievable for them. They mentioned that Sony Playstation's division has achieved 16% as of the first quarter fiscal 2025. So even PlayStation is only hitting 15%. Xbox is hoping to double that. And I think Nintendo was somewhere around in the mid-20s. Their best years were somewhere in the mid-20s as of recently. I don't know the specific numbers, but I don't think they've actually hit 30 either. So they might be a little bit higher than PlayStation in that regard when it comes to profit margins, only because remember, they sell their consoles not at a loss, where PlayStation and Xbox have always been willing to sell their consoles at a loss to make up for the services and the game side, when Nintendo just clearly makes up for it on the game side and the services, and they're never going to lose money on the consoles. But that's pretty much all the information that I got for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. See ya.